So yesterday after I tweeted about zigzag drills and my disdain for using them to teach ball handling or defense, I received a call from one of my friends who coaches and has a couple children who play basketball, and he was asking about how, if we're not going to use something like a zigzag drill to teach defense, how do you teach defense? And he kind of explained the situation with his children, his daughter who is exceptionally quick and has always been a very good defensive player, but now he thinks that she moves into high school, she's starting to struggle a little bit, versus his son who's never been quick, never been athletic, and in his words looks terrible defensively in practice and in drills, but in games he feels is pretty effective as a defensive player. So how do we explain these differences, and then ultimately how do we teach defense? And so my initial answer is I think defensively we underestimate the importance of basketball intelligence. For years Shane Battier was lauded for his defensive efforts, and he was never the quickest or most athletic player on the court. And as my friend said about his children's coaches, typically coaches will often associate defense with either athleticism or effort. So if a player gets beat, they just need to play harder. Or if they get beat, maybe they're just not athletic enough. And those are, from coach to coach, those are the two common refrains. Basketball or defense is effort. You just need to want to play defense more, and then you'll be a better defense player. Or, we need better athletes to be better on defense. And I think we really underestimate the importance of intelligence on defense. A player like Battier was a very intelligent defender. He knew where he wanted to guide offensive players to get them to take the shots that he wanted them to take, as opposed to the ones that the offensive player would want to take. And he was quick in rotations and help defense. He drew a lot of charges because he was great at anticipating where the ball was moving. And so these things aren't necessarily foot speed, and they're not necessarily effort, they're intelligence. Obviously effort and desire are part of it. You have to want to be a good defensive player. If you're just lazy and don't care, then you're not going to be a good defensive player no matter how smart you are. Obviously to compete at the NBA level, you have to be, top 1 to 5% athlete in the world, basically. So it's not like just anybody could go out there, and if they were smart enough, they could make those plays. But at the specific level that a player is playing, again, I think we underestimate the importance of intelligence, in terms of being able to make decisions, being able to anticipate, being able to read plays, and how these really factor into being a good defensive player. And so how do you develop these things? Again, it comes down to me to playing more. And so when I look at the way that I was taught defense, excuse me, and the way that most coaches teach defense, defense typically is not taught in a way that develops decision-making skills. So when I was growing up, we did a lot of zigzag drills. Now my problem with zigzag drills from a defensive perspective is when we did them, we were always told as an offensive player, you take 3 dribbles to the right, then you change directions and take 3 dribbles to the left. As a defensive player then, I don't have to work as hard because I know exactly when the offensive player is going to change directions. And then 2, I don't have to read the offensive player's change of direction move. I simply have to count dribbles. And so I'm not developing any kind of awareness of what leads to a certain move, or how to best watch the offensive player and start to pick up certain cues that are going to enable me to make decisions or anticipate in a game. Instead, I simply have to count dribbles. Then I get in a game, I can't count dribbles, because if I'm guarding a offensive player and I count 1, 2, 3 and I expect a change of direction move, well, that offensive player is just going to go right by me, in a straight line. So it doesn't transfer. From a team standpoint, most coaches teach defense from a shell. And so you put 4 on 4 and you walk through it, it's not full speed, the offense isn't really trying to score, and defensive players are told to get to very specific spots, and sometimes even marked with X's or designations on the court, the midline or 1 foot in the key, straddling the lane line, things like this. So they have to get to very specific spots based on where the ball is on the court. and offense players hold the ball, wait for them to get to that spot, and they make the next pass. And that's not at all how offense is played. Offense players don't necessarily wait for the defense to move into position before they make the next pass. They're not always stationary. They're not always stationary in the same spots that are used in the shell drill. So there's a lot of differences between the shell drill and a game, but we're not teaching the decision making in the drill, because we tell the defense exactly what's going to happen. We move from they just pass the ball around the perimeter to then the next rotation is pass and cut, and then go away. So we know exactly who the cutter is at all times. The next one might be when they catch the ball on the wing, you can make baseline penetration, so we know exactly where the penetration is going to go. And so when the coach is doing all of these instructions, the defense doesn't have to learn. They just have to follow the coach's instructions. And the instructions are given towards the offense, but that tells the defense exactly what the offense is going to do. And so the defensive players don't really have to read the game. They don't have to make decisions. They don't have to anticipate. They just have to know exactly what the offense is going to do and get there, at the right time. And then a game is, 100% different. I don't know what my opponent's going to do. I can watch film and start to anticipate what he or she may do, but that doesn't mean they're going to do it all the time. And if they're a good offensive player, they're going to adjust to how I'm playing defense. So if I'm not close enough, they're going to shoot. If I'm rushing out, maybe they're going to penetrate. Maybe they penetrate middle instead of just penetrating baseline all the time. Maybe they have weak side cuts instead of pass and cut, and the passer cutting. So you can certainly anticipate things based on videotape of your opponents, but if we're only learning to play general defense in drills such as the zigzag drill and the shell drill, I don't think we're developing a full defensive player. We might be moving on the proper rotation or practicing the proper rotations, which to me is debatable because basketball is 5-on-5, not 4-on-4, so I think rotations change with 5 players on the court anyway, so I would debate the efficacy of the shell drill just from that standpoint. But let's say that is the right rotation that you want. But you're not, and then in the zigzag drill, you could argue that you're teaching correct footwork. I would argue that you're not, but you can make that argument if you want. But we're not developing the anticipation, the decision-making skills, and the intelligence to play defense. And ultimately, these are the skills that are going to make a great defensive player. So getting back to my friend, from my perspective, and having never seen either of his kids play basketball, just from what he's told me over the years as they've grown and developed, his daughter, who started out as a really athletic, really quick player in her childhood, is now getting to a level where everybody is pretty much the same, quickness and athletic ability. And so when she was younger, she could rely on being faster and quicker than other players, and she could do well defensively. She could make up for mistakes, and she could, gamble for steals and just use her foot speed. And now she's at a level where, the foot speed has balanced out, and she wasn't forced to really develop a lot of intelligence or anticipation skills because she relied so much just on her speed. His son, on the other hand, who was always slow, has had to adapt to a lack of speed and learn a great deal of cue learning, anticipation, decision making, and intelligence, because that's the only way that he could survive. He could not rely on his foot speed to play defense. He had to rely on kind of mental shortcuts, anticipating, reading cues early, and then getting a head start in the right direction. And these are the types of things that Shane Battier did when he was an effective defensive player. If he started, let's just compare him to LeBron James. If they started their movements at the same time, LeBron James is always going to win. He's bigger, stronger, faster. But because Shane Battier was an intelligent defensive player, he could generally start that movement earlier than most players, and therefore he'd kind of have a head start. One of the things that I use a lot, that I learned from Doc Rivers, is the offense gets to say go. And so if you're racing and the offense says go, the offense should win every time. Well, an intelligent player like Battier kind of changes that. And so because they anticipate, they're no longer allowing the offense to dictate and the offense to say go. They're reading the cues before the offense actually says go, and they're already on the move when the offense starts their move. And therefore, even though they may not be as quick from a footwork standpoint, their intelligence and their speed of thought allows them to get to the spot early and in time. And so to me, this is the difference between my friend's son and my friend's daughter, is now that my friend's daughter is kind of on equal footing in terms of foot speed and hasn't developed this intelligence, she needs to adapt now and start to develop these skills. And to me, the best way to do that is live play with some informative feedback from a coach. Just doing the shell drill some more or doing some more zigzag drills isn't going to help her. She needs to be engaged in play where she can learn to read different types of players, different types of situations, and start to accumulate this implicit knowledge of how to read situations and anticipate and use different visual cues to move quicker or to move earlier so that she can move quicker. And to me, his son has already developed some of this implicit learning because he was forced to. It was the only way that he could stay in the game and stay competitive, was to adapt to his slower foot speed and become faster in terms of his thinking. So he had to develop those perceptual cues, seeing things, anticipating, and getting a jump and starting to move earlier than a quicker player would have to. And so to me, playing a lot, playing against different opposition, playing both unstructured, structured, these are the ways that we can learn these things implicitly and learn to make use of visual cues. And if we're only doing strict drills and only playing against the same player all the time in practice, we lose a lot of this learning. And so when my friend asked me what he can do, that's what I told him is, get her involved in more pickup games, have her play against better players, have her play against different players, have her play in 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, different situations, and allow her to start to learn implicitly, to see different things, to process information quicker, and learn to anticipate and really make faster decisions so that she can be a more intelligent player and complement that with her quickness, and then she can become a better defensive player overall.